All right, so get ready because we're about to take a deep dive today into the world of AI and autism. You sent in some pretty thought-provoking articles, especially this study from JAMA Pediatrics on delayed autism diagnosis. But there's also this other piece, We Miss Some,
Right.
that's taking a hard look at AI and autism through this really interesting historical lens. So are you ready to explore the ethics of it all?
Absolutely. It's a fascinating and really complex landscape, especially when we consider the motivations behind using AI to detect autism in the first place.
Right, and We Miss Some, they don't hold back at all. They're really critical of that JAMA study,
Mm-hmm.
saying it's more about efficiently identifying autistic individuals
Right.
than actually, helping them.
Yeah. It all comes down to how we frame autism.
Okay?
The JAMA study, while it presents itself as a way to understand delayed diagnoses,
Right.
it seems to approach autism as a problem that needs to be solved through early detection and intervention.
And We Miss Some is basically saying,
Yeah,
hang on a second, who benefits from all this efficiency?
right.
Is it really autistic individuals? Or are there other forces at play here?
Yeah, they argue that institutions like schools and healthcare systems
Okay,
have a vested interest in early identification.
interesting.
For schools, it could be about streamlining students
Right.
into specific programs and interventions.
Uh-huh.
For healthcare, early diagnosis could mean tapping into a larger market
Right.
for autism-related services.
So instead of focusing on, understanding
Yeah,
and supporting autistic individuals,
yeah,
it becomes about fitting them into existing systems, even if those systems
right.
aren't designed to meet their needs. It's almost like saying, let's catch them early so we can mold them into what we need them to be, which is kind of unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah, and that's where the critique of the traits model comes in.
Okay.
This model, which is often used in autism research and AI development,
Mm-hmm.
it reduces autism to a checklist of observable behaviors,
Okay.
and it relies on these stereotypical understandings of autism that have historically excluded many autistic people.
Right. It's like trying to define a rainbow by only looking at one color.
Exactly.
You're missing the complexity,
Yeah.
the beauty of the whole spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And We Missed Some points out that women, people of color,
Right.
and those who don't fit the traditional diagnostic mold are often overlooked because of this limited model.
Exactly. And if AI is trained on this flawed model,
Yeah.
it could exacerbate these biases,
Wow.
making it even harder for certain groups to be recognized as autistic
Right.
and receive appropriate support. It's like giving an algorithm a biased textbook
Yeah.
and expecting it to come up with unbiased results.
Right. Okay. So we're seeing how this focus on early identifications
Right.
and the use of a potentially biased model
Yeah.
could be really problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But We Missed Some takes it a step further,
Okay.
drawing parallels between AI and autism research and its use in areas like policing and surveillance, which I thought was really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, the concern is that AI, if used in a certain way, could become a tool for social control,
Okay.
reinforcing existing power structures,
Uh-huh.
and potentially targeting individuals based on their perceived differences.
Okay.
They give the example of predictive policing algorithms
Right.
that have been shown to perpetuate racial biases.
So they're suggesting that AI-driven autism detection could lead down a similar path, focusing on quote-unquote managing autistic individuals rather than creating truly inclusive
Right.
and supportive environments, which is kind of a chilling thought. Are we moving towards a world where AI is used to categorize and control people based on neurodiversity?
It's a lot to unpack,
Yeah, it is.
but I think it's vital that we have these conversations.
Absolutely. And it ties into another key point raised by We Missed Some,
Okay.
this idea of misdiagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
They challenge the assumption that a delayed diagnosis is always a bad thing.
Right.
Instead of seeing it as a failure to detect autism early enough,
Yeah.
they ask us to consider why autistic people might be missed in the first place.
Right. So instead of blaming the individual
Right.
for not being quote unquote caught early enough,
Yeah.
we should be looking at the system itself
Okay.
and how it defines and diagnoses autism.
Yeah, it's almost like saying a fish is somehow failing because it hasn't been caught in a net.
Exactly.
Maybe the net is just in the wrong place.
Right.
Or maybe the fish isn't even supposed to be in the net to begin with.
Precisely. And We Missed Some provides some really compelling examples of how this plays out in
Right.
real life. They point out that autistic children who are able to conform
Uh-huh.
to classroom expectations,
Okay.
or adults who successfully mask their difficulties,
Right.
are less likely to be identified.
Which suggests that diagnosis often hinges on how much an autistic person disrupts or deviates from the norm,
Mm-hmm.
rather than on their actual needs or experiences.
And this brings us to a crucial question.
Okay.
Who really benefits from refining autism identification? The We Miss Some article argues that institutions benefit far more than autistic people themselves.
So it's not about empowering autistic individuals.
Right.
It's about making systems run more smoothly.
Exactly.
Whether it's enforcing compliance in schools,
Uh-huh.
expanding markets for interventions in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
or optimizing workforce productivity.
Right.
And We Miss Some argues that this approach can have really dehumanizing consequences.
They have this one quote that's really stuck with me. Autistic people are not seen as individuals with intrinsic worth. We are therapy cattle, fed into the industry as soon as possible to ensure the longest period of profitability.
Wow. That's a powerful statement. It really highlights the potential for exploitation when we frame autism through this lens of institutional benefit.
And this leads us to a particularly sensitive
Okay.
and complex area of discussion
Yeah.
that We Miss Some brings up, the role of Israel in developing AI models for autism detection.
Right. This is where the historical perspective really comes into play.
Uh-huh.
The article argues that Israel's history as a testing ground for technologies of control,
Right.
including AI-driven surveillance and military applications, is directly relevant to this discussion.
They're essentially saying that these tools, while they're marketed as advancements,
Yeah.
are part of a broader system of classifying and managing populations. It's a controversial argument, and it's important to note that we're not endorsing or condemning this viewpoint here. We're simply trying to present the information as it's laid out in the source material,
Right.
allowing you to form your own conclusion.
It's definitely a lot to process, but I think it's important to consider the historical context here and the potential implications of these technologies, especially when it comes to something as personal and complex as autism.
Absolutely. And while We Miss Some offers a pretty bleak critique,
Yeah.
they do offer some alternative approaches that focus on resisting the surveillance and medicalization of autism.
Okay.
They argue for a complete rejection of the deficit-based model,
Okay.
the idea that autistic people need to be fixed.
So they're calling for a paradigm shift
Yes.
where research is led by autistic people themselves,
Right.
focusing on their lived experiences and needs.
Exactly.
They specifically highlight able-grounded phenomenology, or AGP, as a promising alternative.
Mm-hmm.
AGP seeks to understand autism from the perspective of autistic individuals,
Right.
emphasizing their strengths and contributions rather than viewing them as problems to be solved.
Right.
So instead of asking, what's wrong with you,
Yeah.
AGP asks, what's your experience? It's about understanding and supporting autistic people on their own terms. I think that's a powerful message, and it makes me wonder, what role can AI play in supporting this kind of approach? Can AI be used ethically and beneficially for autistic people, or are these technologies inherently problematic?
That's a question we'll continue to explore as we
Yeah.
delve deeper into this complex landscape. This is just the beginning of our deep dive, and there's so much more to uncover.
Right.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll continue unpacking the ethical complexities of AI and autism and consider what a more inclusive and just future might look like. We're back, and we're picking up our exploration of AI and autism, and I'm still grappling with some of the points raised in We Missed Some. And they're saying these AI autism detection tools, they don't just emerge in a vacuum.
Right.
They're connected to these bigger systems,
Mm-hmm.
especially those with roots in Israel's security tech.
That's right. The article points to Israel's history
Okay.
of developing and exporting surveillance technologies.
Right.
And they suggest that this expertise in monitoring and categorizing individuals could be applied to autism detection in ways that might not be so obvious.
Okay, so it's not just about identifying autistic traits,
Right.
but maybe also predicting behavior
Yeah.
or even controlling it. That's pretty unsettling.
They argue that the impulse behind these technologies,
Okay.
whether it's applied to security
Mhm.
or to autism, is ultimately about control.
Okay.
It's about the ability to detect, categorize, and manage individuals based on perceived patterns.
Wow. That's a heavy thought. It makes me think about how data is used
Right.
in all aspects of our lives these days.
Yeah.
Are we headed towards a future where our every move, our every kink is analyzed and categorized by algorithms? And what does that mean for
Right.
those who don't fit neatly into those categories?
The article makes a direct connection between the development of AI models for autism detection
Uh-huh.
and technologies used in areas like facial recognition
Okay.
and predictive policing.
Interesting.
They suggest that the same algorithms used to monitor individuals in these high-security contexts could be adapted for identifying and categorizing autistic people.
So it's like taking tools designed for surveillance and applying them to a completely different context
Mm-hmm.
without necessarily considering the ethical implications.
Right.
It's a bit like using a hammer to fix a watch.
Yeah.
You might get the job done, but you're likely to cause more harm than good.
They argue that companies developing these technologies see a market in both security and healthcare.
Right.
They suggest that the same drive for efficiency that fuels the development of predictive policing tools also motivates the creation of technologies
Okay.
to monitor children deemed at risk in schools, for example. It's about identifying and managing those who deviates from the norm,
Okay.
whether that norm is defined by behavior or by neurology.
And this brings us back to the question of who benefits from these technologies.
Right.
If it's not primarily autistic people, then who is it? Are we creating systems that ultimately benefit institutions and those in power rather than those who are supposedly being helped?
That's the central argument of We Missed Some,
Okay.
that this data-driven autism research that's emerging from Israel
Right.
and potentially being adopted elsewhere is less about helping autistic people
Okay.
and more about refining these systems of classification that could be used for surveillance and control.
Okay, I have to admit this is starting to feel a bit like a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Is there any evidence to suggest that these autism detection models are actually being used in harmful ways?
The article doesn't provide concrete examples of direct harm,
Okay.
but they do draw parallels
Okay.
between the exportation of Israeli military technology and the potential for exporting these autism detection models. They argue that both are marketed as advancements,
Okay.
but could have concerning implications.
So it's more of a warning,
Right.
like a call to be cautious and critical about how these technologies are developed and implemented.
Exactly. And they highlight the U.S. as a prime example,
Okay.
pointing to the integration of Israeli security technologies into American policing and surveillance systems.
Right.
They're concerned that autism research might follow a similar path,
Okay.
further entrenching this medical model
Okay.
that frames autism as a disorder to be managed
Okay.
rather than a difference to be understood and respected.
And that connects back to their argument about misdiagnoses.
Yeah,
If the goal is to identify and manage autistic individuals as early as possible,
right.
then any delay in diagnosis is seen as a failure.
Mm-hmm.
But what if those misdiagnoses are actually cases where autistic individuals are thriving without needing to be labeled or categorized?
That's a key point they raise,
Okay.
the idea that not every autistic person
Right.
needs or wants a diagnosis. Forcing people into these categories can be harmful in itself, especially when those categories are based on deficit-based models
Right.
that pathologize different.
It's like assuming that everyone needs glasses just because some people have vision problems.
Right.
Not only is that inaccurate,
Yeah.
but it also ignores the fact that some people might prefer not to wear glasses, even if they do have vision problems.
Exactly.
It's about individual choice and autonomy.
The article goes on to suggest that this research,
Right.
while it doesn't directly involve human subjects,
Uh-huh.
could contribute to harmful outcomes.
Okay.
They even draw a parallel to genocide, which
Oh.
is a pretty extreme comparison.
Okay, that's a strong claim. Are they saying that AI-driven autism detection could lead to something like that? I'm having trouble understanding how they're making that connection.
They're not suggesting that AI is going to be used to systematically eliminate autistic people.
Okay.
Their point is more about the dangers of categorization and the potential for technologies to be used in harmful ways, even if those harms aren't immediately apparent.
So it's about the slippery slope argument.
Right.
The idea that seemingly benign advancements
Right.
can over time be used for more sinister purposes.
They connect the drive for precision in autism detection,
Okay.
using AI to the logic behind AI-assisted warfare,
Right.
implying that both strive for greater efficiency in identifying and managing
Okay.
those who deviate from the norm.
I see. So it's less about a specific outcome
Yeah.
and more about the potential for AI to be used in ways that prioritize control over individual well-being.
Precisely. And they point to Israel's history of controversial research practices,
Okay.
including studies on prisoners and marginalized groups,
Right.
as evidence of a broader system that prioritizes control and management
Okay.
over individual well-being.
I'm still struggling with a genocide comparison,
Okay.
but I understand their broader point
Yeah.
about the potential for these technologies to be used in harmful ways. What's the alternative? Do they offer any solutions?
Yes, and this is where things start to get a bit more hopeful.
Okay.
They advocate for a complete rejection
Okay.
of the framework that views autistic people
Mm-hmm.
as problems to be solved.
Okay.
They call for a paradigm shift in autism research,
Okay.
one that prioritizes the well-being and autonomy of autistic individuals.
So instead of trying to fix autistic people,
Yes.
we should be focusing on understanding and supporting them.
Exactly, and they emphasize the need for autistic-led research
Okay.
that centers lived experiences,
Mm-hmm.
ethical considerations, and meaningful improvements in the lives of autistic people.
That makes sense. Who better to understand the needs of autistic people
Right.
than autistic people themselves? But how does that translate into practice? What does autistic-led research actually look like?
They specifically highlight able-grounded phenomenology,
Okay.
or AGP, as a promising alternative
Okay.
to the traditional deficit-based models of autism research.
Okay. AGP is all about centering autistic voices and experiences, right?
That's right.
Instead of trying to make autistic people more neurotypical,
Mm-hmm.
it's about understanding and appreciating their unique ways of being in the world.
Exactly. AGP researchers ask questions like,
Okay.
what is it like to be autistic? How can we create environments that support autistic ways of being?
Okay.
It's a radical departure
Yeah.
from traditional autism research,
Yeah.
which has often focused on identifying deficits
Yeah.
and developing interventions to correct those deficits.
So it's about shifting the focus from fixing to understanding,
Yes.
from control to empowerment.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that autistic people are the experts on their own experiences
Mm-hmm.
and that their perspectives should be central to any research or interventions that affect their lives.
The article's concluding message is a powerful one.
Okay.
They argue that the future of autism research is not predetermined.
Okay.
It's a future that we must actively shape
Right.
through our choices,
Hmm.
our actions,
Yeah.
and our unwavering commitment to justice and equity.
It's a call to action, a challenge to move beyond the fear and the stigma surrounding autism,
Right.
and to embrace a more inclusive and just world where neurodiversity is celebrated, not suppressed.
They urge us to resist the allure of technological solutions that promise efficiency and control,
Right.
recognizing the potential for harm
Yeah.
and the importance of centering autistic voices
Right.
in all aspects of research and intervention.
I think this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've explored some complex and challenging ideas,
Right.
and I'm sure you're processing a lot of information right now.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that this is just one perspective, and there are many different viewpoints on this issue.
That's right. This is a conversation that's far from over.
Yeah,
And we encourage you to continue exploring these topics,
absolutely.
to seek out diverse perspectives,
Mhm.
and to engage in critical reflection.
Knowledge is power.
That's right.
And the more we understand about the ethical implications of AI
Yeah.
and its impact on autistic people, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for a future that is truly just and equitable for all.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
On this journey of exploration and discovery, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you some food for thought.
It really has.
Remember, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create.
I love that.
And we have the power to create a future where technology is used to empower and liberate,
Yes.
not to control and oppress.
Okay, welcome back to our deep dive into AI and autism. I don't know about you, but after that last part, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I mean, we covered so much and we missed some. Definitely paints a concerning picture
Yeah.
of how AI could be misused.
It's true. The article doesn't shy away from these strong comparisons, even bringing up historical atrocities like the Holocaust, to highlight the dangers of categorization and control.
Yeah, I get that they're trying to make a point about how technology can be used for good or for ill, but that comparison felt a little jarring to me.
Yeah, their main point is that the pursuit of efficiency and control,
Okay?
even in seemingly benign contexts like,
Yeah.
healthcare or education, can have unintended consequences.
Right.
They argue that the same logic that drove the development of punch card systems for tracking individuals during the Holocaust could be applied to AI systems today.
So it's not about AI being inherently evil, but it's about recognizing that potential
Yeah.
for these systems to be used in ways that violate individual rights and freedoms.
Exactly. They're urging us to be critical and cautious,
Uh-huh.
to question the motives behind the development of these technologies,
Right.
and to consider who benefits from their implementation.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in the excitement of all these technological advancements,
Right.
but we need to remember that technology is a tool, and like any tool, It can be used for good or for bad.
Hmm.
It all comes down to who's wielding the tool and what their intentions are.
We Miss Some is basically calling for a fundamental shift
Okay.
in how we approach autism research. They advocate for moving away from the medical model, which frames autism as a disorder to be treated,
Okay.
and towards a model that prioritizes the well-being and autonomy of autistic individuals.
It's about recognizing that autistic people are not broken
Right.
and don't need to be fixed.
Right.
Their brains work differently, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's something to be valued and celebrated.
They see able-grounded phenomenology, or AGP,
Okay.
as a promising framework for understanding autism
Okay.
from the perspective of autistic people themselves.
AGP, it's all about centering autistic voices and experiences, right?
That's right. Instead of trying to make autistic people more neurotypical,
Yeah,
it's about understanding and appreciating their unique ways of being in the world.
exactly. AGP researchers ask questions like, what is it like to be autistic?
Right.
And how can we create environments that support autistic ways of being?
Exactly.
It's a radical departure from traditional autism research,
Yeah.
which is often focused on identifying deficits and developing interventions to correct those deficits.
The article's concluding message is a powerful one. They argue that the future of autism research is not predetermined.
Okay.
It's a future that we must actively shape through our choices, our actions, and our unwavering commitment to justice and equity.
So it's a call to action, a challenge to move beyond the fear and the stigma surrounding autism, and embrace a more inclusive and just world where neurodiversity is celebrated, not suppressed.
They urge us to resist the allure of technological solutions that promise efficiency and control, recognizing the potential for harm, and the importance of centering autistic voices in all aspects of research and intervention.
You know what? I think this entire deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've explored some really complex and challenging ideas, and I'm sure our listeners are processing a lot of information right now.
Right. This is a conversation that's far from over.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we encourage you to continue exploring these topics,
Right?
to seek out diverse perspectives, to
Ah.
engage in critical reflection.
Knowledge is power, and the more we understand about the ethical implications of AI and its impact on autistic people, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for a future that is truly just and equitable for all.
I completely agree. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and we hope it's sparked your curiosity and given you a lot to think about. Remember, the future is not something that happens to us, it's something we create. And we have the power to create a future where technology is used to empower and liberate, not to control and oppress.
Beautifully said. This is host speaker name,
And I'm expert speaker name.
signing off.